This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 17th of June 2019, and I am 2J.
I am 2M.
And I am Miss K, your host. Again, in case you missed it, this is Winning Headlines. Let's take a look at today's headlines. The Star, I'll crush you, angry Uhuru tells rebels. The Standard, angry Uhuru warning to RUTO team. And Daily Nation, furious Uhuru breaks ranks with rebel MPs.
My goodness.
Yes.
2M, what happened this weekend?
I'll crush you, I'm angry.
I have never seen the son of Jomo this angry.
Yeah.
The point where he raised his voice, not just once, a couple of times.
Yeah.
But he was addressing Gema MPs that have been politicking. I don't know what is wrong with that. But I asked myself,
Yes.
let's play this forward. And I have an extreme thought.
Okay.
If Maraga sends parliament and the president home, all right, and it is said that the president will have done his final term, and therefore he cannot do another term,
Yes.
who will be the beneficiary?
Do you want us to answer that question?
It is William
is it
Ruto.
rhetorical?
It is William Ruto.
Yes, no, that's
Right?
very true.
My point is, I think William Ruto should be handled very carefully.
But are we saying that the president has a right to be angry?
Oh yes, he has, definitely.
Most definitely, because you don't go into somebody's backyard
Yes.
and start, picking their flowers
Yes.
and taking them as if they're your own.
And then you put them on the hair.
Exactly, you go around, you're masquerading and you're showing off.
The hair,
So I think, he was right to do what he did. And I love the way that the Nation put it.
Yeah.
They said that the president, who in a fit of rage
Yes.
switched from Kiswahili to his native Kikuyu language.
Yes.
So I'll be honest,
Yeah.
I didn't understand the speech.
Neither did I. And
It's
neither
today
did
when-
the person to whom you're claiming it's
Yes.
addressed.
No.
Therefore, how effective
Oh
is
yes,
it?
no, but if you
Maybe
guys,
that's why it was effective.
if you guys watch William Ruto, and I watch him a lot, when he goes to Kikuyu areas,
Yeah.
he speaks a little bit of Kikuyu, and he can make. I saw him smiling and gesturing
He was
when the
being
president
polite.
was saying some things. And let me tell you, there are guys behind him, part of that Tanga squad. When everybody else was clapping, they didn't do it. They didn't flinch.
Yeah.
And when Uhuru was talking to them, he was actually addressing them.
So Tanga people
Yeah.
knew what was being said.
They knew.
William Ruto is just there smiling and being polite because he don't know what's going on. He's
probably
just
thinking-
being polite. Unless someone is sending him quick fire text messages below the
With the translation.
with translations below the seat over there.
Yeah.
He was clueless, so he was just being polite.
Yeah.
The way we are when we're asked
Yes.
to pay money in Kikuyu, and you're like,
Yeah.
I don't understand you.
But I have another question. You see, we have moved a long way from independence to multipartyism until now. Do you think it is right for the president to order people's minds, especially when we have progressed so much democratically?
And what that reminds me of
Yeah.
is I think we saw images floating around on social media today of a headline from the 70s, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Where his father
Yes.
said something extremely similar. I think it mirrors what's on the
Precisely.
Star.
He says, I will crush you, KPU.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And exactly on the Star it says, I'll crush you angry.
Uhuru tells rebels.
I thought that was so interesting, that mirroring.
And there were ramifications then. Then the vice president, I think Jaramogi,
Yes.
he was put under house arrest.
Yeah.
So what will Uhuru do?
And that
Only
is
time
the
will
thing
tell.
to watch for, but the apple never falls very far from the tree. And this is evidence of that. I don't know if what then happens will be similar.
Absolutely.
What do we say about these headlines? And we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Are these headlines topical, or are they speculative? Are they repetitive, or are they groundbreaking? And finally, are they thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I will say, I did actually like all 3 headlines.
Yes.
I think they all automatically made me want to pick up the paper and find out what I missed out on this weekend.
Yes.
Even
But-
the pictures, I mean, like this
Yeah.
one, the Daily Nation has a picture of Uhuru actually looking like really angry, throwing his hands.
Oh,
And
yes.
Fuming.
But I will say, for the symbolism and the mirroring of what his own father had said many years ago, I think I would give it to the Star. I don't know if they did it on purpose.
No, let me tell you.
And if you say at all, if that's someone, whoever picked up that 1970s headline and put it up there, should have referenced this Star. And if that was what they were referencing when they were doing this, then that was thoughtful, brilliant.
And
I don't know.
I can tell you this headline, Uhuru meant every word of what he said.
So can we toss the Daily Nation and the Standard and keep the Star as our winning headline?
Yes.
The Star is our winning headline.
Fantastic.
And on to our next segment, the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down for you. We ask ourselves, is the cartoon humorous or is it dry? Is the cartoon satirical or is it pessimistic? And finally, is the cartoon effective or just plain lazy? Okay. Since we kept the Star, let's start there for our cartoon.
Yes.
My favorite, also.
That's particularly why I picked it. It's Monday. Let me just ruffle your feathers a little bit.
I like this, but before I analyze it, let me describe it. Caricature of television. Inside the television is Raila Odinga, the Prince Uhuru Kenyatta, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, and the sneering William Ruto. Right?
He's
not crying today.
Yes, and you see they're on one portrait, but Uhuru's hand seems to be going to the volume knob and adjusting it. Because and the caption here is cranking up the political volume. Context is Uhuru Kenyatta does not want politics, he wants development. I don't know how sustainable that is. After all, the people he's telling not to do politics are career politicians.
Yeah, I don't know if I like this cartoon. I think it's also in reference to this past weekend. I say let's look at the other ones before we make a judgment call.
Okay,
to me, this is just it's bland.
Yes.
The fact that you said bench it tells me that I'll have a week of positives. I didn't toss it immediately.
I've been told to be objective, so I'm trying.
Oh man! All right.
Gado.
Yeah, Gado. I think this is in context of Sudan, all right, and caricature of the junta. Military junta, Sudan, it's called Hemeti, I think, and he's on top of a tank. He's atop a tank, and there's a car. In front of the tank is a car called Democracy, and has a megaphone, and it's saying, "Get out of the way before it gets messier."
Well, they're both saying it to each other.
The same thing. Yes.
Yeah. I think this reminds us of the game of chicken.
Yes.
In game theory.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where you have two cars that are driving towards each other, and the point is to see who's going to be the chicken and swerve out of the way.
Correct.
But what I'm gathering here, because what we know, the solution in game theory for the game of chicken is if you are able to look bigger and mightier than your opponent, you're most likely going to win.
Yeah.
And here, I don't even think that, you see, the game of chicken, why you have to appear bigger is because there's a illusion of equality. We're both in similar cars, we're both headed towards each other.
Yes.
But here you have what I think they call a soft skin. You know, here the guy in the tank is definitely in a position of authority. This guy with only a megaphone and an accelerator to protect him, called Democracy, has nothing on it.
Yeah, I think this is a great cartoon. It is. And we know he speaks to his international audience. It's tighter.
I think it is.
Okay.
You want to bench it?
We're benching everything.
No, we're tossing the Star now.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Finally.
You guys.
Oh, my God.
You guys.
He always comes on Monday.
I think so, yeah.
And
what a start to the week.
Yeah, he's come with his Standard 7 set book.
To be honest, I thought that, when I opened and saw this cartoon, I was convinced that it wasn't for this week, and I disregarded it. I was like,
we have accused him of having this comic strip style where you could almost miss it because it doesn't look serious.
Also, perhaps because they have multiple cartoonists, you do a cartoon and then you keep it until when it's required of you. That's so true. It's not really topical.
All right, we should describe it though.
Yeah.
So here we have somebody who is holding a notebook that says the economy.
It's probably Rotich.
It may be Rotich.
Yes.
And he has a lot of choices before him, but they're all traps.
Yes.
Chinese loans, domestic borrowing, World Bank,
Shylocks,
Eurobond 1, Eurobond 2, betting.
Mobile apps.
Yeah, I think this is a very pessimistic cartoon. Iga is telling us that these are the only options before us.
I don't know this.
Also, I find it very interesting. Whenever you have a trap, it leads to a trapper. Who is the trapper? All these traps are just hanging in the air. They don't have a particular owner.
It's not even that. It's just playing to what is in bars. You know, what's in the public, sphere. Everyone is talking about this with the most...
not today.
It's pessimistic.
I'm sorry, not today. They were talking about it on Thursday.
Yeah.
Toss it. Does that leave standard as the winning cartoon? And are we actually going to pick a cartoon that is not Kenya-based?
I think so. I like it because of the game theory reference.
Okay.
And I think that plays well into us being a school of practice.
I also think it's an effective. I think it's an effective
I think it is
cartoon.
effective.
Tuam, you've just breezed through that conversation. You agree, but you don't disagree.
I think, do you think Gado knows the game of chicken?
I think he does. We know Gado is a very smart person. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just asking.
Just jumping. What is our final thought?
Now, our final thought. It is a book inspired, it's inspired, it's a thought inspired by a book called Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. And guys, you know, I was going through this book as I was reading it. You know what song was playing in my head?
Now you're going to grace us with some singing today.
Oh, yes, let's do it.
What song was it?
It's called Redemption Song
Okay.
by Bob Marley. And, you know, he says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. No one but yourself can free your minds. You know, redemption song.
Okay. Don't quit your day job, yeah?
Yeah, don't quit your day job.
All right, so what about this book made you think of that song?
Look, slavery, as he puts it, and in my view, was very layered, right? It's not just about you working in plantations. It's not just about you being a city slave, okay? You are enslaved in the mind. And what Booker T. Washington, and I read this together with a man called, I think, Frederick Douglass, right? They had such a hunger for education, right? That they would actually be taught by their slave masters or by wives of their slave masters how to read. And the layering of this enslavement, for you to get out of it, right, you needed a little bit of knowledge, you needed a little bit of education. For you to get utmost freedom, you had to have the weapon of the white man, and that weapon was knowledge. And it wasn't so easily obtainable by the slaves. But they realized that for them to get out of these shackles, you know, they needed to have the mind of and knowledge of the white man.
Yeah, so Up From Slavery is actually an autobiography written by Booker T. Washington himself in 1901. And it is an amalgamation of articles that he wrote for a magazine that was then turned into this book. So through this book, he talks about his journey from rags to riches, how he was actually one of the last generations of black leaders that came from slavery, or that was born into slavery, rather. So he had this, as you're saying, he had this desire for education, and once freedom came, he decided that he wanted to teach himself how to learn. So this book is, yes, as I said, Rags to Riches, that celebrates hard work, self-improvement, but also adopting white values. So that's a bit of where the criticism in this book comes from. So he encourages black people to be patient and avoid fighting for civil rights and social equality. So a lot of the critique in this book says that maybe he was clamoring to white donors, because he started one of the most successful black colleges and vocational schools in the country. And a lot of the book focuses on how the school started in a shanty, and they got money from white donors, and they built the students themselves built this school into this wonderful thing that it then became. So the critique is that he was clamoring to white audiences. So he talks about in the book how he was taught to eat with a tablecloth and a napkin and a fork and knife, how he was taught to regularly bathe and brush his teeth, and how he ended up keeping his slave name Washington, whereas you had other black activists like Malcolm X changing their names. So I think that a lot of the themes in this book, and I think Ms. Kay will talk about that, they're very interesting, and I still think that they apply today.
And it's true, they do apply. The thing is this, and I think both of you have referenced two different books. So the first one is Up From Slavery, Booker T. Washington, versus the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave by Frederick Douglass. So the thing about these books is that they're old books. So Frederick Douglass wrote his first-hand account of runaway slave, if I could call him that, in 1845. And it's the most well-known reference and written book on that until we all met Solomon Northup and had the movie 12 Years a Slave. So the best known then before was that, Frederick Douglass's personal account. And you look at it against Booker T. Washington, who wrote in the year 1901, and he went through the emancipation of slaves. He was born into slavery, then while he was a child, freedom came and was proclaimed on them, and then now he went through this whole process, as you're saying, of rags to riches. And what then came out of his book is what I would call a self-help autobiography. It would fall in the self-help section of any bookstore for this reason. A lot of black people who read that book, and yes, he is critiqued for all of those things, but one of the things that he is seen as a leader for is that he showed people the value of education, and you have referenced that. He showed people the dignity of work, and he said that no education is complete without you learning a vocation. And then he also showed people what success is measured by. So he used his own life to show that any black person, no matter how bad or how disadvantaged they were, can prove themselves if they can get a valuable education and become productive members of the society. And I think I like one of his quotes. He says that success is measured by the obstacles we have to overcome to reach it, and not by what we have actually attained. So he says the process of achievement is more important than the finished product. And I think that at that time that would speak to a lot of black people. Even as they went through the civil rights movement, that spoke to a lot of black people because they felt that they came from a very hard place. And he was telling you that don't worry, just put in the slog, work hard, and that it doesn't matter. In the long run, you will be recognized for your merit. But there's the criticism you gave.
There is a criticism. But then also I would say that in those things he said, they were very practical applications that people could put into their lives. Because we talked about this earlier. They're released from slavery, and now they have to take care of themselves. They have to fend for themselves in a world that they do not understand. So this book was a practical application of how if you attain education and have a good skill that you can use every day,
then you'll be fine. Because he says this, that on their particular plantation, they're called in the morning to the big house and they're given this proclamation that you're now free. And then they go through this jubilation, elation, celebration. And then as they're walking back to their homes, they discover, okay, fine, now I'm free.
What do I do now?
Next?
What next? I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of these children. And that joy turns into gloom. So he was trying to tell them, this is what you can actually practically do with this freedom that you've been offered.
I like that. And that's the enlightenment of getting yourself by, because now you're free. But there's also the enlightenment of identity. Now, Malcolm X was known as Malcolm Little. And Little, he derived that name from his slave owner, right? Now, he became Malcolm X. His brother became Joseph X. 2X. Because there was one X already, so we needed 2X. But where am I going with this? I think that when the missionaries landed in Black Africa, right, they confused our ancestors, and they told us that for us to get to be recognized as people who are worth of being seen by whatever it is, we will get English names. And they say, no, we'll not get English names, we'll give you baptism names, right? So people called John, then there's Jeremiah, then there's the Kevins, and there's the Junes of this world. You know, and the point is, for you to be enslaved, you needed the identity of the white man, of the slave owner. And for you to get to a certain form of enlightenment, to get to full enlightenment, it was not just enlightenment to know that you have moved from stage A, now you have to fend for yourself. It's also a stage of knowing that you need to go back to your naming systems.
And President Kibaki, we talked about this the other day,
absolutely.
Right? He changed his name.
Yes, he did.
He removed his name.
And he in fact then inspired others,
such as Ngugi wa Thiong'o,
to change their names as well.
To change their names and drop the names of colonization, if I can call them that.
Jomo Kenyatta was called Johnston Kamau. Mwai Kibaki was called Emilio Stanley Stanley Mwai Kibaki. And Ngugi wa Thiong'o was called James Ngugi.
I will say, as controversial as some of the things he said are, I think what Booker T did that was very smart is he used the white people to his advantage. So I know you have people like W.E. Du Bois who are very critical of how he was sympathetic to the white man and he told the black people to just stand back. But it ended up working to his benefit because he was able to educate a lot of black people and simultaneously give them skills so that if education did not work, they were able to have a practical...
That is very, very true.
A
fallback, yes.
And that's very true. And W.E. Du Bois had a very big criticism of Booker T. Washington, because Booker T. Washington did something revolutionary. At some point, he delivered a speech, what they call publicly the Atlanta Compromise speech. And he gave this speech to a lot of white people in a big audience. And in this speech, he's criticized for having, and I think this is the problem that we continue with through Malcolm X and versus how am I forgetting his name?
Frederick Douglass.
No. Yeah. Malcolm X versus Martin Luther.
Yes.
And I think that argument began with Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And that was the question of, if I can call it the chicken or the egg.
Yes.
What do we, now that we are free, what do we pursue first?
Yes.
Do we go for civil and political rights, or do we go for economic emancipation? So Booker T. Washington believed, leave the civil and political rights. They will come after.
Yes.
First, get yourself some economic respectability and independence, become a propertied owner.
Yes.
Versus W.E. Du Bois, who wanted us to go for, wanted the blacks to go to the streets, get the civil and political rights. Once you have a seat at the table, now we can start working out whether or not or how to get the economic emancipation.
Yeah, that's very true.
I like that. I would rather have economic emancipation first before I go political.
And these are some of the themes that we're going to be exploring this week with the final thought.
Yes.
African American stories on slavery, emancipation, civil rights. I think it will be an interesting one.
Yes.
And this journey of politics versus development will be one of the things that we will discuss this week. This is the winning headlines. We had a winning headline from The Star, I'll crush you, and a winning cartoon from Gado of The Standard. I'll end with a quote. Every persecuted individual and race should get much consolation out of the great human law, which is universal and eternal, that merit, no matter under what skin is found, is in the long run recognized and rewarded. I don't know if that is true, but we will see. Have a great day.